She lived hidden among vegetables and silence until a letter awakened her past. What seemed like a mistaken invitation became the perfect stage to reveal who she truly was, and no one at that gala would forget the name that returned from oblivion. Welcome to the channel. Before we begin, hit like and subscribe so we can keep creating stories like this. On the outskirts of Santa Fe, among golden hills and agave fields, Hope Fairchild led an austere existence that few envied and no one questioned. At 45, her life revolved around her vegetables, her chickens, and the small stall she set up on Sundays at the local market. To the townspeople, she was nothing more than a reserved farm woman, with hands roughened by daily labor and a gaze that avoided prolonged conversations. Her small estate, the Haven, barely stood out in the landscape. A simple adobe house with a red tile roof, a chicken coop, and a carefully tended garden where she grew everything from chilies to medicinal herbs. Every morning, Hope would rise before dawn, brew coffee in a worn-out pot, and go out to work. The land with the same devotion others reserve for their prayers. "The land doesn't judge those who tend it," she would murmur as she turned the soil with her hands. It was one of the few thoughts she shared with Mrs. Lupita, the elderly woman who helped her twice a week, and who, after 5 years, still didn't truly know her employer. "Miss Hope, why does a woman like you live like this, so alone?" Mrs. Lupita once asked as they shucked corn under the porch. Hope only offered an enigmatic smile. "Some solitude is chosen, Lupita, and there are luxuries in simplicity that money can't buy." What no one in Santa Fe suspected was that this woman in worn clothes and a straw hat hid a past that, if revealed, would shake the foundations of their small-town society. Every night, after closing her bedroom door, Hope would open an ancient carved wooden trunk. Inside, carefully folded, lay silk dresses, photographs in silver frames and yellowed newspaper clippings, memories of another life, of another woman who no longer existed except in that trunk and in her memory. Hope's routine was interrupted one spring Tuesday when the mailman, Mr. Esteban, handed her an ivory-colored envelope with her name written in elegant calligraphy. It was an invitation to the grand annual charity gala hosted by the Montgomery family at their estate, the Pearl, the most important social event in the region. The Montgomery family, owners of one of the most prosperous tequila distilleries in California, gathered the local elite each year to raise funds for charitable causes, or so they claimed. "Dear Mrs. Fairchild, we are pleased to invite you to our annual gala," Hope read, furrowing her brow. Clearly the invitation wasn't for her, but for another Fairchild, likely the widow of the town's former notary with whom she shared a last name but no relation. She was about to return the invitation when something caught her eye. The host's name, Vincent Montgomery. A shiver ran down her spine. That name belonged to another life, to memories she had buried beneath years of silence and work. Could it possibly be the same man? After all this time? For days, the invitation remained on her table, like a temptation, or perhaps a warning. Every time she looked at it, a whirlwind of memories assaulted her. Glittering ballrooms, conversations in 3 languages, orchestral music, the clinking of crystal glasses. A life she had left behind for reasons no one in Santa Fe could imagine. "Will you be attending the Montgomery's party, miss?" asked Mrs. Lupita upon seeing the invitation. "They say it's so elegant they even bring flowers from the capital." "It's not for me, Lupita, it must be a mistake," she replied, but something in her voice had changed. That night, after Mrs. Lupita had left, Hope opened the trunk again. This time she took out a small blue velvet box. Inside, a ring with a sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds sparkled, as if time had stood still. It was the only thing she had kept from her former fortune, not for its material value, but for what it represented, the legacy of her father, a man who lost everything except his dignity. The next day, against all odds, Hope responded to the invitation. She would attend the gala, not for fun nor for nostalgia, but for a purpose that had matured over 15 years of voluntary seclusion. It was time to face the past, though no one at that party knew they were about to welcome a ghost among them. The news that the peasant woman would attend the Montgomery's gala spread quickly through Santa Fe. No one understood why a woman who barely attended Sunday Mass would agree to go to such an exclusive event. The speculations were immediate. "She's probably going to sell her herbs," mocked Carmen, the bakery owner. "Or maybe they hired her to clean up after the party." Hope paid no mind to the comments. With meticulous precision, she began preparing for the night that could change everything. From her trunk, she pulled out a simple yet elegant dress, a deep blue like the calm sea. It wasn't as ostentatious as what the ladies of the local high society would surely wear, but neither was it the attire of a simple peasant woman. It was the dress of a woman who knew both worlds and had consciously chosen which one to live in. The night of the gala arrived with a starry sky over Santa Fe. From her small estate, Hope could see the lights of the Pearl illuminating the hill like a beacon in the darkness. She took a deep breath, slipped on the sapphire ring, and for the first time in 15 years applied a bit of makeup to her sun-weathered face. "This is for you, Dad," she whispered in front of the mirror, her eyes reflecting a determination no one in Santa Fe had ever seen before. The Pearl estate shimmered that night like a palace from a fairy tale. Lanterns lit the entrance path as dozens of luxury cars lined up in front of the majestic colonial mansion. Arriving in a rickety taxi, Hope felt she wasn't just crossing the entrance to a property, but stepping over the threshold between two worlds that were never meant to meet. The valet gave her a strange look as he opened the taxi door, as if expecting her to be the companion of someone important rather than a guest. With her head held high, Hope handed over the invitation and walked along the cobblestone path toward the main entrance, where a woman with an electronic tablet checked the names of the attendees. "Hope Fairchild," she said in a calm voice. The woman scanned the list, frowned slightly, but finally nodded. "Welcome, Mrs. Fairchild. The reception is in the main garden." Upon entering the garden, the contrast couldn't have been more striking. A sea of designer dresses, sparkling jewels, and imported perfumes filled the space. The women sported elaborate hairstyles and flawless makeup. The men wore custom-tailored suits and watches that cost more than everything Hope owned. She, in her simple blue dress, her hair pulled back into a low bun and barely a touch of lipstick, stood out like a crow among peacocks. The whispers began almost immediately. Groups of guests eyed her sideways, exchanging comments over glasses of champagne. Hope ignored them, accustomed to moving through the world without seeking approval. She took a glass from a passing waiter and headed toward a quieter corner, where she could observe everyone without being the center of attention. "Are you lost, ma'am?" asked a woman's voice, its tone a mix of curiosity and disdain. Hope turned to face Sophia Montgomery, the evening's hostess, a woman in her 50s, with dyed blonde hair and a champagne-colored dress that accentuated her well-maintained figure, thanks to discipline and discreet surgeries. "Not at all," Hope replied with a slight smile. "I appreciate your invitation. Mrs. Montgomery." "Do we know each other?" asked Sophia, studying her with distrust. "Not personally, I'm Hope Fairchild." Sophia's face showed momentary confusion. "Oh, there must be a mistake. I was expecting Constance Fairchild, the notary's widow." "I thought so. However, the invitation came in my name and address," Hope replied calmly. "If my presence is inconvenient, I can leave." Something about the dignity in Hope's tone unsettled Sophia, who quickly regained her role as the perfect hostess. "Absolutely not. Mistakes happen and everyone is welcome at our charity gala. May I ask what you do, Mrs. Fairchild?" "I work the land," she replied simply. "I have a small property on the outskirts of Santa Fe." The disappointment on Sophia's face was almost comical. Clearly, she had hoped to discover that Hope was some discreet businesswoman or the distant relative of someone important. Upon confirming she was simply a farmer, she lost interest. "How charming. Enjoy the evening," he said, before walking away to greet more prominent guests. Dinner began an hour later. Hope was seated at a peripheral table, alongside other guests of lesser importance in the Montgomerys' social hierarchy. As the waiters served dishes crafted with ingredients she herself had grown, but prepared with sophisticated techniques. She discreetly observed the diners, searching among them for the man she had truly come to find. It was during the main course when she saw him. Vincent Montgomery, the host, made his entrance into the dining room with the poise of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. A man in his 60s, with salt and pepper hair, an angular face, and a practiced smile that never reached his eyes. Hope's heart skipped a beat. He was older, but undoubtedly the same man who had destroyed her family. Fate intervened unexpectedly when a young waiter, perhaps nervous from the presence of so many important figures, stumbled near the head table, spilling red wine on the imported linen tablecloth. The cries of horror came without delay as the young man paled under Sophia Montgomery's furious glare. Without a second thought, Hope rose and approached the table. "Allow me," she said calmly, taking the napkin soaked in water and salt that another waiter had hastily brought. With precise, efficient movements, she began treating the stain. "The trick is not to rub, but to press from the edges toward the center," she explained to the young waiter who watched her gratefully. "Then we sprinkle a little salt to absorb the rest before it seeps into the fibers." The technique worked perfectly, leaving only a faint pink trace where a permanent stain had threatened to form. The guests watched with a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Where did you learn that?" asked Sophia, both impressed and irritated by the unexpected intrusion of the outsider stealing the spotlight. "At La Rosey Institute in Switzerland," Hope answered without thinking, immediately regretting her indiscretion. A bewildered silence fell over the table. La Rosey was one of the most exclusive and expensive boarding schools in the world, attended by the children of royalty and the most prominent international fortunes. How could this simple woman who grew vegetables have attended such an institution? From the far end of the table, a voice frail with age broke the silence. Hope Mendoza del Castillo?" All eyes turned to an elegant elderly woman, around 80 years old, who had risen unsteadily to her feet. It was Mrs. Carmen Elizalde, widow of an ambassador and one of the most respected figures in Mexican high society. Time seemed to stand still. After 15 years of hiding her true identity, it took only a few minutes for the past to catch up with her. Hope looked at the elderly woman, recognizing her instantly. They had shared a room at that Swiss boarding school more than 30 years ago. "Hello, Carmen," she finally replied with a sad smile. "It's been a long time." The old woman stepped closer, studying every detail of her face as if trying to reconcile two images separated by decades. "My God, it really is you. We thought you... Everyone believed you." Emotion choked her to words. Mrs. Carmen turned toward the other guests who watched the scene in astonishment. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce the woman who was my dearest friend in my youth. This is no simple peasant. Before you stands Hope Mendoza del Castillo, heiress to the Mendoza Bank and one of Mexico's most significant fortunes until the financial scandal 15 years ago." A murmur of astonishment swept through the room. Many remembered that scandal vividly, as it dominated the headlines. The respected Mendoza Bank, with over a century of legacy, collapsed after being accused of fraud. Don Francis Mendoza, the patriarch, was named as the responsible party, though he proclaimed his innocence until his dying day. What few knew was that his daughter, Hope, the heiress who had been groomed to take the reins of the family empire, vanished entirely after the downfall. Some rumors claimed she had fled to Europe, others that she had taken her own life out of shame. No one could have imagined she had been living all this time as a humble peasant, just a few hours from Mexico City. Vincent Montgomery, who until then had observed the scene with apparent indifference, visibly paled upon hearing the name Mendoza. Their eyes met, Hope's and hers, and in that brief exchange of glances lay an entire universe of secrets and guilt. "Francis Mendoza's daughter, in my home," she murmured, her voice a blend of disbelief and thinly veiled fear. The atmosphere in the Pearl's Grand Hall shifted in mere seconds. The same guests who had regarded Hope with disdain moments ago now watched her with a mix of fascination and shame. The women who had criticized her simple dress suddenly found it minimalist elegance. The men who had ignored her now competed to offer her a drink or a more comfortable chair. Hope remained unmoved by the change in attitude, her serene dignity unwavering all evening. Yet her eyes never left Vincent Montgomery, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the last few minutes. "It's a pleasure to have you with us, Miss Mendoza," Sophia finally said, struggling to regain control of the situation. "If I had known your true identity—" "I've been Hope Fairchild for 15 years, she interrupted firmly. "The Mendoza name belongs to another life." Mrs. Carmen took her hand affectionately. "You were always too proud, my dear. When you disappeared, I tried to find you. Your father was devastated. My father was destroyed by false accusations," Hope replied, raising her voice slightly to ensure everyone heard. "He chose to lose everything rather than betray his principles. I chose to honor his memory by living with the same integrity." Her words fell like stones into stagnant water, sending ripples of discomfort through the room. Many remembered how they had turned their backs on Francis Mendoza when he was accused, despite decades of friendship and business dealings. Vincent, Montgomery visibly unsettled, approached Hope. "Miss Mendoza, as Fairchild, might we speak in private?" She nodded. This was the moment she had waited 15 years for. The Hacienda's library was an impressive space, with mahogany shelves stretching to the ceiling and a collection of books that would have delighted any intellectual. Yet Hope noticed many. Volumes looked pristine, as if they had never been opened. They were more decoration than knowledge. "I never imagined you'd still be in Mexico," Vincent began, pouring himself a whiskey with trembling hands. "Why come now? Why to my home?" I didn't come for revenge, if that's what you fear," she replied, refusing the drink he offered with a wave of her hand. "I came because I needed to look you in the eyes when I asked. Why did you do it?" Vincent averted his gaze to the windows overlooking the garden, where the party carried on as if nothing had happened. "Business is complicated, Hope. Sometimes, circumstances. My father trusted you," she interrupted. "You were his partner, his friend. He considered you a brother." The weight of those words seemed to slump Vincent's shoulders. After a long silence, he spoke in a barely audible voice. "I was desperate. The financial crisis was sinking us all. My overseas investments failed, and I needed to cover the losses before my creditors discovered the whole." He paused. "It was just a temporary loan from the bank's funds. I planned to pay it all back, but when the authorities started investigating, I had to divert attention toward your father." Hope felt the air leave her lungs. For years she had suspected something similar, but hearing it from his own lips was different. "Do you know what you did to him? You didn't just steal his inheritance and his reputation. You took away his faith in the people he loved." "No," Vincent admitted. "I've lived with that guilt every day. I built all this," he gestured around, "on the ruins of my best friend's life. Every night, when I close my eyes, I see his face at the final hearing, staring at me as if he knew the truth." "I knew it," confirmed Hope. "She always knew it was you, but she chose not to expose you. She told me the truth always finds its way, my child. It doesn't need our help." Vincent collapsed into a leather chair, suddenly aged and vulnerable. "What do you want from me, Hope? Money? A public confession? That would destroy everything I've built, my family." "Just like you destroyed mine," she finished, but without bitterness in her voice. "No, Vincent. I don't want your money or your public confession. I want something more valuable." She then explained her proposal to create a rural foundation in the name of Francis Mendoza, funded by a substantial portion of the Montgomery family's wealth. A foundation dedicated to helping small farmers, promoting sustainable practices, and offering interest-free microloans to rural families. There would be no publicity, no public image campaign. It would simply be a quiet form of reparation. "It's more than I deserve," Vincent finally said. "I accept." When they returned to the drawing room, the guests noticed something different about them both. No one could explain what had changed, but the tension had given way to an eerie calm. Without announcements or explanations, Hope, discreetly, bid farewell to Mrs. Carmen Elizalde, promising to visit soon, and left as quietly as she had arrived. In the following months, Santa Fe witnessed a gradual transformation. The small estate, the Haven, began receiving regular visitors. Young people interested in learning sustainable farming techniques, women seeking advice on medicinal herbs, families looking for guidance to start their own gardens. Hope, generously, shared her knowledge, but kept her private life as guarded as ever. Few connected these changes to the mysterious Mendoza Bank that had begun operating in the region, offering aid to farmers and organizing training workshops. Rumors about Hope's true origins had spread, but she neither confirmed nor denied them. She simply continued working the land, now with a renewed purpose. It was at one of the agricultural fairs organized by the foundation that the encounter altering the final chapter of her story took place. While explaining the advantages of certain irrigation techniques to a group of farmers, Hope felt a persistent gaze upon her. When she looked up, she found herself face to face with someone she hadn't seen in over 20 years, Alexander Saunders, her first and only true love. He approached hesitantly, as if afraid he was standing before a ghost. "Hope?" he asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and hope. "Is it really you?" Alexander had been her college sweetheart before their paths diverged. He had left for Europe to finish his studies while she returned to Mexico City to work alongside her father. By the time he tried to reach her after the scandal, Hope had already vanished. "It's been so many years, Alexander," she replied, her throat tightening. "I looked for you everywhere," he confessed. "When you disappeared, I hired investigators, asked all our acquaintances. I even visited the boarding school in Switzerland, thinking you might have gone back there. I was here," she said simply, "learning to live again." Alexander told her he had returned to Mexico 3 years ago, after becoming a widower. He was an agronomist and had developed innovative farming methods for arid regions. When he heard about the Mendoza Foundation, he volunteered, never imagining he would reunite with her. That afternoon, sitting on the porch of the Haven, with the sunset painting the fields gold, Hope finally shared her whole story. She told him about Vincent's betrayal, the years of self-imposed solitude, their reunion at the gala, and the agreement they had reached. "I never imagined there could be peace after so much pain," she confessed. "But there is, Alexander. It's not forgetfulness, it's something deeper." He took her hand tenderly, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "I've always admired your strength, Hope. Now I admire it even more." In the weeks that followed, Alexander became a constant presence at the Haven. Together, they expanded the garden, implemented more efficient irrigation systems, and began experimenting with organic crops. But beyond their shared projects, something was blossoming between them, a second chance neither had expected to find. One afternoon, as they planted fruit trees at the back of the property, Hope paused and looked around with fresh eyes. The Haven was no longer a hiding place, but a true home. The land that had been her solace was now the foundation of a future she had never dared to imagine. "What are you thinking about?" asked Alexander, stepping closer to her. "That sometimes we lose everything to find what truly matters," she replied, with a smile that lit up her sun-weathered, time-lined face. "My father used to say that true wealth isn't in what we possess, but in who we choose to be when we lose it all." Alexander looked at her with admiration. "Your father would be proud of the woman you've become." As the sun set behind the hills of Santa Fe, Hope Fairchild, once Mendoza del Castillo, intertwined, her fingers with Alexander's. They didn't need grand mansions or lavish parties. Life had taught them that happiness could be found in the most unexpected places, in fertile soil, in honest work, in the calm after the storm, and above all, in a heart that knows how to forgive and begin anew. Dear listeners, we hope Hope's story has moved you as deeply as it moved us while telling it. Sometimes life strips us of everything except our dignity and courage. To continue exploring tales of redemption and second chances, we've prepared a special playlist with stories that celebrate human resilience. Find it by clicking to your left. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every week, we bring new stories that explore the depths of the human soul and its incredible ability to rise after adversity. What would you do in Hope's place? Would you forgive as she did? We're waiting for you in the comments to share your thoughts.